Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We'll get started here. People are starting to kind of come in. We'll get started here in about a minute or so, and then we'll get on with the webinar. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thanks everybody for attending today's webinar. Today's webinar is going to cover the Sage Fixed Assets Management module that is available with the Sage Intacct product. Um, we got our little baseball player over here on the right-hand side with opening day coming up in a couple days. Some quick introductions. So my name is Joe Gupser. I am the partner in charge of the Sage software division here at Martin and Associates, and there's my contact information. And then Brett was going to be on the call, but he's unable to attend due to something that came up today. But there is Brett Penzinger is our um, director of the Sage software division here at Martin and Associates. And there is Brett's contact information. Please reach out to either one of us with any questions you might have or anything you want to follow up on. Some quick housekeeping notes for today's webinar. The webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email after the event with a link to the webinar that you can go back and watch certain parts later if you have questions on things or if you wanted to forward it on to anybody else at your office. Any questions that come up in today's session, please put them in the Q&A or the chat features, and we will work to get them, answered at the end of the webinar here. So quick agenda, or here's the agenda for today's session. So we're going to, just briefly discuss what is a fixed asset. Then we're going to do a Sage Fixed Assets Management overview. And then we're going to look at some of the key features of the fixed assets module. We'll talk about some of the new features that were added to the fixed assets management module as part of the 2026 release 1 update of Sage Intacct. And then we're going to do a, demo. This is the main part. We're going to actually get into the software here and kind of, spend the majority of the time actually in the software looking at some things. So just some PowerPoint slides here up front. So just real quickly, what is a fixed asset? Fixed asset is basically a piece of property or equipment that benefits your organization for greater than a year. They can be tangible, like a laptop, land, desk, or intangible, like patents, goodwill, so on and so forth. And what the Sage Fixed Assets Management module will do is, track all this for you, track your depreciation, calculate your depreciation all in one place inside of Sage Intacct. So quick overview of the Sage Fixed Assets Management module. So Sage Fixed Assets Management, and you will oftentimes see it referred to as SFAM or SFAM for short. It's a natively built module that works with the Sage Intacct Core accounting, and it provides a complete, flexible, automated assets management and tracking system. It automates and simplifies the management of tracking of assets from their acquisition all the way to their, it should say disposal or retirement there, but it tracks the entire life cycle of the asset. It helps to increase control over the processes and data, gives you real-time insights into your business decisions and real-time insights into your assets. As part of the fixed assets module, it adds a new dimension to your Sage Intacct system called the asset dimension. You also have depreciation compliance available, and it has top level and entity level support, whether you decide to put them at the top level or your assets at your entity level. It can support either one of those. Some features of the Sage Fixed Assets Management module. As I mentioned, it's native to Sage Intacct. As a result, it has the same look and feel of the Sage Intacct product that you're used to, which helps to lead to a more ease of use because of the comfort of the module. It will natively connect with your accounts payable and purchasing modules. And you're going to see in a little bit, it can actually create assets from those modules. And with that being said, you can drill down all the way from your assets all the way down to your source documents out in these modules if it's created that way. You have the ability to do instant asset spending analysis because of that new asset dimension, because it's going to track things based on this dimension. You're going to be able to report off of that with reports and dashboards, and we're going to look at that a little bit here coming up. Automated depreciation postings across multiple financial and tax books are available. It has what Intacct refers to as the next gen user interface, so the new user interface. So it's a nicer experience inside of Intacct with the newer screens and the newer data imports available. Provides better performance, scalability, efficiency with a best-in-class technology. I mentioned earlier that it supports both top level and entity level processing. So whether you put your assets at the top level, which sits above all your entities, or in each, and then tag them to the entities, or you put them at each individual entity, it can support that for you. It helps you to save time during your month end and year end with the automation of your, of the acquisition to the disposal process we talked about, with the calculation of your depreciation for you. I mentioned earlier there is multiple books available, so you could have automatic depreciation across multiple books. There's some email delivery services available based on what you're doing inside of the module. Helps you increase your control over your processes, helps to secure your data, and helps to reduce your risk with complete audit tracking out in the system. And it helps you to make informed decisions with real-time reporting and insights, which is even more amplified with that asset dimension that we talked about before. So Sage, back in February, so last month, released their first quarterly release of the Sage Intacct product for 2026, and it's referred to as 2026 Release 1. And here's some of the new features that were added to the Sage Fixed Assets Management module. It now allows you to manage construction and process assets. Okay, so it supports your end-to-end CIP asset acquisition, tracking, and capitalization. It helps you to manage long-term capital projects like buildings and infrastructure directly inside of your Sage Intacct product. Bills and invoices get coded to CIP GL accounts and then can automatically create CIP assets and track spending, reduce manual effort, all right in the system. Prior to this, you had to kind of track all this outside the system and then create the asset, or you had to use the older Sage Fixed Assets module to track the construction and process. And it's just, a screenshot here, kind of what it looks like. There'll be a tab called CIP if you have it turned on. And in the state, while the asset is in that construction and process stage, is called construction and process. And you'll see down here, you have your CIP GL account. Another new feature added to the fixed assets module with release 1 is change asset cost using AP adjustments. So if the asset cost is going to increase or decrease, You can do that now through an AP adjustment right inside of Sage Intacct. This helps to make it easy to correct costs when asset values change, whether it's from capital improvements, revaluations, or you just there was an error on the initial recording of the asset. Prior to this addition, changes were only possible when an asset was in the ready for review state, which meant you had to reverse all the postings that have already happened against that asset to make the change and then rerun all the postings against that asset, or you had to do workarounds inside the general ledger to account for it. When you make the change and the asset either increases or decreases, then future unposted depreciation that is left will automatically update either higher or lower based on if you increased or decreased the cost. Okay. There's a new roll forward report, which provides visibility into the entire asset life cycle. So it includes the following types of activities. You get the asset cost, and that's the opening cost, additions, disposals, and closing balances, depreciation amounts, opening period depreciation, disposals, and closing balances, and net book values, opening and closing balances. You can filter this report by asset, asset range, asset classification, location, the state that the asset's in, whether it's in ready for review, construction in progress, or placed in service, for example. You can also choose whether you include non-depreciable assets in the report or not. And here's an example of what the report kind of looks like. So here's your costs, here's your depreciations we talked about, here's your net book values that we talked about. Up here is the data that you see on the report. The last new feature I want to talk about that was added in Release 1 is Flexible Asset GL Account Assignment. Prior to this being added in Release 1, each asset classification, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit, and we're going to see it here in a little bit, they each required their own unique asset GL account. So you had to have a unique account for each one of your asset classifications. Now, multiple asset classifications can share the same GL account. The GL account still acts the same way, still works the same way, recording asset-related transactions, but you now have more control to align your classifications with your company's accounting structure if you have the need to combine multiple classifications in one account. A new asset classification field has been added to bill and purchasing transaction lines to give you more flexible experience. And here's an example right here where you now pick what asset classification asset is going to. And we're going to see that coming up here in a minute. All right, so we are going to move into the demo. So I'm going to stop sharing that for a minute, and I'm going to bring up my Sage Intacct. All right, so Sage Intacct here. I'm going to cover a couple of things here. We're going to cover a little bit of the setup, then we're going to kind of work through, adding an asset, and I'm going to show the asset actually being added through an AP bill, just to kind of show you how that process all works. So the first thing I want to talk about is Sage Fixed Assets Management Configuration. So if I go to the Fixed Assets Management module, and then go underneath the configuration, this is where you configure or set up the module to act the way you want it to act. So the first field is this, the asset ID sequence. So you set these sequences up in the system that helped you number certain fields in the system, like customers, vendors, POs, sales orders, on down the line. You also can create one for fixed assets. And then you pick which one you're using here, and this will control the automatic numbering and formatting of new asset IDs when they get put into the system. Construction in progress, if you want to use that feature, you have to come in here and check this box right here. Next, we get into the journal posting rules. So for each book ID that you're tracking, you set up posting rules for that book, and each rule gives you details about the journal rule, the journal, the convention, the useful life, on down the line, where you set up the journal posting rules by book out in the configuration, and that will copy over. You'll see in assets here in a little bit. This is where the Sage Intacct app integrations is where you start turning on your integration between Sage Fixed Assets Management and your other modules. So you can say create assets from bills if you want to, and you can say create asset from purchasing transactions if you want to. Okay. Next, we get down to the depreciation setting. And this is whether you want the depreciation posting to be automatic, which means it just happens at month end automatically for you and does the posting, and you don't have to do anything, or not check that box and it's more manual, and you kind of go in through the module and you kick off the depreciation when you're ready to run it. Down in the journals in the account section, you have a gain or loss GL account here. And this is the GL account for recording the gain or loss amount when you do asset disposals. So you're picking an account from your chart of accounts here, and it's for when you do asset disposals and there's a gain or loss on the disposal, it'll hit this account right here. The fixed assets management journal. So you pick the journal you want to record any fixed assets related entries to. This journal is used to record the following journal entries. So whether it's an asset transfer, whether it's a CIP asset capitalization, or whether it's a non-depreciable asset disposal, it'll all hit those. All those transactions will hit whatever journal you tell it to right here. Then we get down into the historical assets. Go live date. The go live date is when you are going to start managing depreciation inside of the Sage Fixed Assets module. So it's basically when you're going to go live with depreciation calculations inside of Sage Fixed Assets Management. Any asset that's out there prior to that date is considered a historical asset. So any assets that get imported in as part of the go live process for going live on Sage Fixed Assets Management module is considered a historical asset if it's in the system with the go live date prior to the date that's defined here. Then we get into this option right here called historical accumulated depreciation. So with this, you can either say to calculate historical depreciation automatically for you. And what that means is the fixed assets management module will calculate all your historical depreciation for you automatically based on the depreciation method you selected and the go live date, and it'll recalculate all that stuff for you. Typically, you would say enter manually, and what you're going to do at this point is you're going to, as part of the import in your custom historical accumulated depreciation amounts for each asset, so that when you go live in Sage Fixed Assets Management, it knows what's left to depreciate. Then the system will use the life of the asset, what's left of the asset, and how much depreciation is left of the asset to figure how much it needs to calculate each of the remaining life of that asset until it's depreciated all the way out. Okay, so that is the configuration of the module. Next, I'm going to cancel out of there if we didn't change anything. Next, I want to get into the Sage Fixed Asset setup a little bit. And what I want to talk about here is asset classification. So you have to set these asset classifications up prior to using the system as well. So asset classifications help to ensure that you have a consistent treatment of your assets throughout the system from an accounting point of view. You can create asset classifications, as many as you want, to categorize your assets for depreciation. They can be used for reporting purposes. You're going to see them used a couple times throughout the system here. Asset classifications contain information about your default general ledger accounts and the depreciation rules. And you assign asset classification to each asset. You can change on each asset if needed. So we're going to go in and look at one of these asset classifications here. I'm going to pick the CE computer equipment asset classification. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and edit this. So the asset classification ID field is a unique identifier for each asset classification you're going to create. Notice I cannot edit this field. Once I create an asset classification, I cannot change the classification ID. You have a classification name, which is a more descriptive name about what the ID is here. There is a status field where you can say whether each asset classification is active or inactive. So if you're getting rid of a certain type of asset and you don't want to use that asset classification anymore because you disposed all of them, whatever, you can flag that asset classification as inactive so it can't be used going forward when new assets are created. Then you get down into your general ledger accounts section. And we're going to talk about a couple of these. So you have your asset GL account. And this is the GL account where transactions involving asset costs and disposal are recorded as debits and credits. You have your accumulated depreciation GL account. And this is the account where depreciation transactions get recorded as credits, and it will offset against the next account we're going to talk about here, your depreciation expense GL account. And this account is where depreciation transactions get recorded. So when you record your depreciation in the system, you're going to debit the depreciation expense account and credit the accumulation depreciation account. And it gets that from the asset classification, which then gets assigned to assets you're going to see here in a little bit. And then the last one I want to talk about here is the disposal GL account. So this GL account is where the sales price is recorded as a debit when you go out and dispose an asset. And usually it's a depreciation account, a gain or loss account, or some other kind of special just disposal account that you created. Next, we get down into the general ledger accounts section. I'm sorry, we get down into the depreciation rules section. In the depreciation rules section, this is the depreciation rules for each book, for each asset that has this classification. Let me do some depreciation. Okay. So common fields out here are, what is the depreciation method? So you can pick your different depreciation methods here that are available in the system. What is the depreciation rate depending on what method you pick? What is the journal posting rule you're using? That goes back out to the configuration that we saw earlier where we set up the journal posting rules. That's where they're coming from. And we had 3 that we had set up out there. So we'll see those 3 set up right here. You give it the useful life for this asset. And then is the useful life months, years? What convention are you using? Full month, full year. What journal ID is it posting to, and what book ID is it posting to or being used for? Okay, so those are setting up your asset classifications. So the next thing we're going to talk about is I want to show you how to create an asset. And I'm going to do this through an AP bill. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an AP bill out into the system for a laptop And I'm going to then have the AP bill create for me a an asset out in the Sage Fixed Assets Management module. So I'm going to go to Accounts Payable. I'm going to go to Bill. And the reason this feature is available is because out in configuration, like we saw earlier, I checked the box to say that it could create assets from the AP bill. So I'm going to come out here. I'm going to say create. Today's date is fine. I'm going to pick a vendor out here. I have a Lenovo vendor that I'm going to say I'm buying a Lenovo laptop here. For the bill number, I'm just going to use today's date of 032426. If you had an actual bill number, you could put it in there. Terms code, this kind of stuff will all default from your vendor. If you have a copy of the bill, or you have specs of the laptop, or you have, any document you want to attach to this AP bill, what you can do is I can drag and drop that right out here and say, here's my attachment, boom, and I put that right on the bill. And I don't have automatic depreciation. Hold on. Yeah, okay, there we go. Then what I'm going to do is I'm now going to record my asset down here at bottom, just like I would do it on a normal AP bill. But instead of going to an expense account, I'm going to hit a computer equipment bill. And this company happened to name the accounts they're going to use for Sage Fixed Assets Management with SFAM, just for visual recognition. So I'm going to pick that account. And I'm going to say that the laptop costs $2,500. And I'm putting this at the top level. So I'm picking what entity it belongs to. So I'm going to say entity 100. And I'm going to say it's for department 100. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this show details here. And that opens up another window for me. And since I said AP bills could create assets, that's why I see this fixed assets management section here. And I'm going to say create a fixed asset. If this should not create a fixed asset, then I would say do not create asset. I'm going to say, here's the asset classifications we looked at before. I'm going to pick my CE computer equipment. And then the name of the asset is what it's going to use as part of creating the asset. So I'm going to say Lenovo 225 for this asset. And I'm going to go ahead and say post, because I'm done with this. Let me make sure I kept my stuff here. Yep, asset, Lenovo 225. Yep. Okay, I'll close that. And I'm going to go ahead and say post. It's going to go out and post for me. It's going to create that asset for me. So it takes a little bit, a couple seconds longer here because it's doing more than just posting this AP bill at this time. Okay. So that created it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into this bill. So 03/24/26 for today's date. And when I'm in this, you'll see if I go to down to the entry section here, and I click on this and then click on the drop down. Okay, what you're going to see here is you're going to see that asset action was create the asset. Here's the GL account that it used for AP. Here is the vendor that it used. But what I want to show here is this asset ID. So we talked about the asset ID dimension that gets added. And it used a combination of the ID is FA0039. That is based on the configuration where we said the system can be set up to tell it how to automatically create the asset IDs. So I had told this company that it start with FA and then do a numeric from there. And it used my description of Lenovo 225 as part of that. Okay. So just wanted to show you what it did once I created that asset, how it creates this asset ID for me. So I want to say done here. We don't need to change anything else in the bill. So let's jump out into fixed assets now and actually look at this asset and talk about it a little bit. So I'm going to go out to Sage Fixed Assets Management Assets, and I'm going to sort this in descending order by acquisition date here. And you're going to see right here is my Lenovo 225, and it assigned an asset ID of FA0039. Okay. I'm going to bring this up. Before I do that, let me cancel this when this comes up. When I was back out here on my asset list, this is called a list view. And in this list view, I can sort on any of these columns by clicking on it once or twice for ascending or descending. You'll notice I'm in order by acquisition date, descending by the arrow right here. I can search on any of these fields if I know I'm looking for, I know I have multiple Lenovo assets, so I can put in Lenovo here and do a search. And it's going to go out and filter for me anything where Lenovo exists in the asset name. I can also change the way these look as well. I can come out here and go manage view and say new view, and it lets me go out and create a whole new list view if I wanted a new list view to be able to look at. And when I create those list views, I can make it be private, which means only my user can see it, or public, which means everybody can see it. And the way you toggle between those list views then is on this drop down by all. You would see any system view up here and any user specific list views here. So you'll see there's some created here if I just want to look at my computer equipment assets or my furniture and fixture assets. And it'll start doing that list view will do some filtering for me based on that view. Okay. Let me go back out of this view. I'm going to get back into that asset I was getting into before. Okay, so I'm in that asset now. All right. And when the asset gets created from an AP bill, for instance, it has a state of ready for review by default. And there is no in-service date. The asset has not been placed in service date, which means there is no depreciation calculating for it yet, which is obvious by when I go to my depreciation schedules, you'll see no schedules to display. To view depreciation schedules, you have to place the asset in service. Okay. All right. I want to go ahead and click on the edit button here. And let's talk about some of the fields inside of fixed assets here. So up in the summary section up here at top, this will show fields like your asset ID right here, the asset name. So if you want to use a different name than what it pushed over from AP, you typed in a name you thought would be good, but it wasn't a good name, or you had a typo or whatever, you can change that right here. You have a status flag for this asset. If it's a serialized number or a serialized item, you could put the serial number in here as well. You have an acquisition date field. You have an in-service date field, and you'll notice right now that is blank because I have not placed this asset in service. We tell it whether to depreciate this asset or not. You'll have the asset cost here. This is where you could put a salvage value if you wanted to. What type of asset is it, tangible or intangible? A lot of that will come over from the asset classification. I can also put an attachment right here on the asset. So if I wanted to put the invoice right there on this asset, I can as well. Oops. Okay, so I can put that in there. I can, in the classification section here, underneath of here, this information will default from whatever asset classification was picked when this asset was created. So since we said this asset was a computer equipment classification, it brought the asset account, the accumulated depreciation GL account, the depreciation expense account, and the disposal GL account all came over from the setup of that asset classification into this asset. And on an asset by asset basis, if I needed to change any of these fields, I can. Okay. And then we get into the depreciation rules section. This will default from the asset classification as well, but can be changed on a asset by asset basis if need be. If you're changing the useful life or anything like that, you can make those changes once it comes over here. And then we get into our dimensions section, and this is tied to the Department 100 and the location 100 because I entered that information in the AP bill when I created this asset from the AP bill. It automatically brought over the dimension of the vendor Lenovo because that's what vendor the bill was created for. And it also gave it the asset ID dimension as well, like we talked about. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of this. Let me now say I want to place this asset in service. So I'm going to go out here and say place in service. And I'll just go ahead and pick today's date as the day I'm going to place it in service. And I'm going to say save. So it's going to do its work. And it's now the state went from, review to in service. And the in-service date is whatever day I just told it I was placing it in service. And now when I go to my depreciation schedules, you'll see I see depreciation schedules out there for any book ID that I had set up for it to calculate depreciation for. And if I want to look at the detail of how it's going to depreciate this $2,500 out straight line across 36 months, I can click on the schedule ID here, and it's going to show me how it's going to depreciate this asset across that book. So here's every period, the amount it's going to calculate, and what the accumulated amount will be as it does each of those postings. And you'll see whether they have posted or not based on the state of each of them right here. And it'll tell you what journal entry number created that posting when it calculated and posted that depreciation. Okay. Let me go back here. Okay. I have two other buttons up here in the top I want to talk about. If you're going to transfer an asset, you have a button up here for transfer. And if you're going to dispose of an asset, there's a button here for doing a disposal. And it could be a complete disposing of the asset or a partial disposal of the asset. Okay. Now, that was showing you an asset being created from an AP bill. Okay. I can also come in here. Oops, that's my list view showing something that's not set for this. I could also come in here and go fixed assets management assets. And, if I have hold on, this is because I switched it my view to the computer equipment and it has some fields on it that wasn't valid. So that's why I was getting those errors. But what I could also do, if I don't have an asset being created from either an AP bill or a PO transaction, I just say, I need to create this asset. I could come in here and say create right inside of here. And in all the fields that we just talked about, I would go through here and say, what is the asset name? What is the status? Serial number. And I would fill all these fields in. Notice there is no asset ID that I give it because the asset ID is automatically assigned based on the setup and configuration of how it's going to get the next available asset ID. But I just fill all these fields in myself. Where when I created it from an AP bill, it came over automatically. So I just wanted to point that out, that you don't have to create it from another transaction. You would just go right um, into there and create it. All right, a couple more things I want to talk about before we wrap up here. Underneath the fixed assets management, I'm going to go into asset groups. So asset groups are just like any other dimensional group in the system. It's a way for you to group your asset IDs together to be able to report off of them. Okay. And it gives you more control for how your data is going to appear on your any financial report you run or any dashboard you see it on. So an example, you could create a dimensional group of assets that have the same asset classification, or an asset group for any assets that were acquired after a certain date, or an asset group for all assets placed in service. So I'm going to go ahead and pick the computer equipment one here. So you give it a asset group ID, and you give it a description of what this group of assets is. And the important part is this filtering right here. So what this is saying, for anything that's a computer asset equipment, I'm saying asset ID, classification ID equals CE. So that means any asset that has an asset classification of CE assigned to it, whenever I run a report or a dashboard and I say, pick the asset ID asset group called CE, it's going to pull all of them assets on that report for me. And you could have multiple filters here. So it could be maybe asset classification ID equals CE. And, I could say acquisition date is greater than, say I want to look at everything as, greater than a certain day. I could come in here and start putting that in, like anything greater than 12/31/2025. So it starts taking multiple conditions into consideration as it's filtering out the assets for that asset group. Okay, if you do not have automatic depreciation calculation turned on in the configuration, the way you run depreciation is you come out to fixed assets management, you go to depreciation, and then you go to post depreciation. And then when you're out here, you can use filters to start selecting, what you want to depreciate. So if the next month we're running depreciation is 3/13/29, you'll see I have multiple pages of data out here, right? So if I know I want to run the 3/31/2029 depreciation, I could come up here and say, I said 2029, but it's 2019. Sorry, this is older data for some of these assets. But I want to say March 2019, and I want to say 3/31. And when I run that, see how that filtered that down now to just 22 records, where before I was scrolling a lot more. So I can start putting my filters in here about what records I want to depreciate. And then I could check the ones I want, or I could just check the entire list here once I got the filter the way I want it. And I can say post depreciation. And that will run the depreciation for these records we're talking about right here. And these would go from a state of not posted to posted, and it would hit the GL with the depreciation expense, the accumulated depreciation, and all that good stuff. Now, if I need to reverse a depreciation calculation for whatever reason, I could do the same filtering for what data I want to reverse. I could pick these and I can say revert, and it will revert that depreciation calculation. Okay, so you would use the revert depreciation. If you need to place an asset back in review, you would want to revert all the depreciation for that asset using this feature. When you revert a posted entry, Sage Intacct will do the following to make sure of correctness and accuracy and consistency across all your modules. So it deletes the depreciation expense journal entry, It clears the actual posting date column. It clears the depreciation schedule entry or changes the depreciation schedule from posted back to not posted, like you see right here, so that we can then rerun the depreciation. You can do reverting in bulk, or you can do it from each individual asset as well. This is an example of doing it in bulk, but I could also do it from each individual asset. So that's kind of running through depreciation a little bit. One last thing I want to show you is how you can use, you can put, fixed asset information on your dashboards, for instance. So I could come out here to dashboards, and I'm going to go to general, and then I'm going to go to fixed assets financial. And you'll see this dashboard has a lot of different data on it. What's my total book value out there? What's my accumulated depreciation so far? What's the carrying value of the difference between them, basically? And this is for all assets right now. I have no filtering going on. And then any gain or loss that's happened. And then there's various reports on here. What are assets out there that are ready for review? So these are assets that are in the system but haven't been placed in service yet, and is waiting for somebody to review them and say, yep, put them in service. So I can have a report that shows me what assets are ready for review. Fixed assets by employee, fixed assets by location, by department. So various reports that are out there, various financial reports that are available that was just added to this dashboard as an example. But there's also out underneath of fixed assets reports, there's custom reports here you can run as well. And you also have the ability underneath of general ledger financial reports. You can run financial reports based on your fixed assets as well. And let me make this be a little bit wider. Let me sort this by report name. So here's, on that dashboard readers looking at, we saw various fixed assets reports. They were kind of coming from here with various filtering kind of put on them and then added to a dashboard. So that's kind of what I wanted to hit and review today for fixed assets. Any questions or anything that came in, Betsy?
Yes, but I missed it when it happened. It was, can you add an image photo here?
Um,
I'm not sure when that was asked.
It was probably asked when we were in fixed assets, and we were on an asset here. So that's where it was being asked of whether you could put an image file here. Yes, it's not just a field that says, here's, an image, drop it here. It would go underneath of this attachment right here, where you could kind of, browse down and look for any attachments you had out there and attach it to it. So like I say, create a new one, and I could give it another. Typically, automatic numbering of attachments is turned on. This doesn't have it on for this one, but I could then browse down to it, and I could, drag and drop an image file right here, where I could call this, image. And then if I had an image file, I would drag and drop it in here. I'll just use that invoice as an example again. This isn't an image. Well, here's a picture file. This is a receipt, so it's not going to be the best thing in the world, but it shows you how you could put an image file on there and save it. And then now I have this attachment called, this happens to be called Chinese buffet receipt, but it's an image file. So when I click on it, I can then click on it and see, the picture of that asset. So yes, you can do that. And you could have multiple attachments per asset. So what would happen is you would just see the one here, but when you click on the paper clip to drill into it here, if you had multiple of them listed, because let's say you put the bill out there, you maybe put an image file out there, and you maybe also put like warranty information for that asset out there. And you might have three different ones. You would see them all listed here, and you could look at each of those individually by clicking on them. Okay. Was there any other ones, or was that the last one, Betsy?
It looks like there's another one. Can this handle reevaluation of assets at any given point in time? Example, sale of a company. And then to follow that up, it was also, can the assets be transferred between legal entities?
The transfer, yes, that's what that transfer kind of is used for. You can do reevaluations out there. We'd have to get into the specifics of everything you're looking to do with that, but there is the ability of doing some of that, yes.
All right, I think that's everything.
Okay. Well, I want to jump back to my PowerPoint here. So our next webinar coming up is in 2 weeks. We have a webinar, Sage AI and Copilot Introduction. So what we're going to do in this webinar is we're going to kind of introduce the Sage Copilot and the Sage AI features and kind of dive into each of them a little bit to, kind of a high level, showing you what's out there. And then when we do this webinar, you're going to see other webinars that are then scheduled below this that are going to be diving into a couple of those AI Copilot features in a little bit more detail. But the next one coming up right now is on Tuesday, April the 7th at 2 o'clock. You'll see invites going out for that as we get closer to it. And again, I want to thank everybody for coming. If you have any questions or need anything from us, please reach out. Here's the email addresses that I kind of provided earlier about just people who are on the call. So just reach out to any of those. You can also reach out to we have a general just sage.intacct@martinandassociates.com email address that's available as well. That is kind of monitored by myself, Brett there, and there's another person here at the office, Pat Anson, as well. We all kind of see that email address, so you can hit any of those addresses as well, and we will be happy to get back to you and answer any questions or help you any way that we can. Have a great day, and I will talk to everybody later. Thank you.